You remember the old wrestling broadcasts, don't you? The fuzzy picture on your television set, the smoke hanging thick in those packed arenas, and then a silhouette would appear in the ring entrance. The crowd would erupt before he even moved, because André the Giant didn't need to speak. His presence said everything. At over 7 feet tall and 520 pounds, he made the world itself look too small. Chairs groaned under him. Doorways barely cleared his head. Grown men looked like children standing beside him. But here's what made André truly unforgettable. It wasn't rage or fury that made him intimidating. It was a calm, gentle way he moved through a world that wasn't built for him. You saw him on Saturday morning television. You heard the stories your friends repeated. And somewhere in your memory, he still stands there, impossibly large, impossibly real. Today, we live in an age of special effects and CGI giants. But André was flesh and blood. And there was one moment when his enormous size changed everything, shaping the legend he'd become. That moment is coming. But first, you need to understand how a farm boy from rural France became the most intimidating presence in entertainment history. André Roussimoff was born in 1946 in the French countryside. His parents were immigrants working a small farm near the village of Molian. Young André, nicknamed DD by his family, seemed normal at first. But by age 12, something was clearly different. He stood over 6 feet tall already. His hands were twice the size of other children's hands. His feet required custom shoes the local cobbler couldn't make. Picture this: a dusty road outside a one-room schoolhouse in rural France. The other children walk home in groups, laughing and pushing each other. André walks alone, his head already level with the teachers. The desk he sat at that morning had bruised his knees. The chair beneath him cracked twice during lessons. His mother had sewn his shirt from 2 regular shirts. Nothing in that little village fit him anymore. The locals whispered about the giant boy. Some stared with wonder, others with nervous curiosity. But André just wanted to be normal. He helped his father on the farm. His brother Jacques later said André did the work of 3 men, lifting hay bales, moving equipment, carrying loads that would break an adult's back, and he was still a child. Here's a detail most people don't know. The playwright Samuel Beckett owned property nearby. Sometimes he drove local children to school in his truck. André rode with him. This enormous boy squeezed into the passenger seat. Years later, Beckett joked they never discussed philosophy. They just talked about cricket and the weather. By 14, André left school entirely. The world of education had nothing left for him. The desks were too small. The future they promised felt impossible. But he was about to discover something. His size, this burden that made him different, could become something else entirely. At 18, André moved to Paris. He needed work. He needed money. And a farm couldn't hold his future anymore. During the day, he worked as a furniture mover. Imagine the scene: a moving company in 1960s Paris. 3 men struggle with a heavy armoire, grunting and sweating. Then André walks over, alone. He lifts it by himself. The other workers just stare. One of them knew a wrestling promoter, and that phone call changed everything. The promoter's name was Robert Lageet. He saw André lift the engine block one afternoon. Just picked it up like it was a suitcase. Lageet didn't see a furniture mover. He saw a fortune. Wrestling in France was popular then, but they'd never seen anyone like this. André began training at night. A French champion named Michel Saulnier taught him the basics: how to fall, how to work a crowd, how to make his size look even more imposing. They billed him as Jean Ferret, after a French folk hero. At 19, André stepped into his first professional ring. The crowd gasped when he entered. He stood nearly 7 feet tall now. He weighed over 300 pounds. But here's what confused people. Up close, André was gentle, soft-spoken, almost shy. He'd shake your hand carefully, afraid of hurting you. He'd duck through doorways and apologize for taking up space. The contrast was staggering. This frightening giant was actually kind. But promoters knew the truth. Kindness didn't sell tickets. They needed him to look unstoppable, so they sent him across Europe. England, Germany, New Zealand. Everywhere he went, arenas sold out. And everywhere he went, one question followed him: how big would he actually get? In 1973, André arrived in North America. Vincent J. McMahon, the wrestling promoter, became his agent. McMahon saw something the others had missed. André didn't need to be in one place. He needed to be everywhere and nowhere. A traveling myth. They rebranded him simply as André the Giant. No hometown, no detailed backstory, just a giant who appeared, destroyed villains, and vanished again. By now, André stood over 7 feet tall. He weighed somewhere around 450 pounds. His hands were so large he made beer cans disappear inside them. McMahon had a specific strategy. He told André to move slowly in the ring. No fancy moves, no drop kicks or acrobatics. Just stand there and let them see you. Let them feel the weight of your presence. It worked. When André walked into an arena, the sound was deafening. People stood up in their seats. Children pointed. Grown men went quiet because television made him look large. But in person, he was something else entirely. He made the ring look small. He made other wrestlers look like children. His opponents had to jump to reach his face. Here's what psychologists might call it today: cognitive dissonance. Your brain knows how big a human should be. Then André appears, and your brain can't process it. The size doesn't compute, so fear fills the gap. Not fear of violence, fear of scale, fear of something that shouldn't exist, but does. Promoters in every territory wanted him. They'd book him for a week, maybe 2. He'd defeat their local champions, packed houses every night. Then he'd disappear to the next territory. The myth grew larger than the man, except the man was already impossibly large, and he wasn't finished growing yet. By the mid-1980s, André had reached his peak weight. Medical records from that time suggest around 520 pounds. His condition, acromegaly, meant his body never stopped growing. His bones thickened, his organs enlarged. His frame carried weight no human spine was designed to hold. Let me paint you a picture. André needs to rent a car in a small American town. The rental agent brings out a standard sedan. André looks at it. He looks at the agent. Then he folds himself, piece by piece, into the driver's seat. The car visibly lowers. The shock's grown. The steering wheel presses against his stomach. He drives away and other drivers stare, because it looks like a giant borrowed a toy car. Hotel rooms became a nightly struggle. Beds were 6 feet long. André was 7 feet plus. He'd sleep diagonally, his feet hanging off the end. Or he'd just sleep on the floor. Airplane travel was torture. His knees pressed against the seat in front. His shoulders took up 2 spaces. Flying for hours in that position, at 520 pounds, with chronic back pain. It wasn't luxury. It was punishment. But here's the strangest part. The bigger he got, the calmer he became. Other wrestlers might yell and posture. André just existed. And that quiet existence in a 520-pound body was more intimidating than any threat. One night in a bar, a friend recalls this story. André walked in. The place went completely silent. Not because anyone was scared of violence, but because they couldn't believe what they were seeing. A man so large he had to turn sideways through the door. The room held its breath until he smiled. Then everyone relaxed. But for those first few seconds, pure intimidation. Not from anger, from presence. The stories about André's strength are legendary. Some are true, some are exaggerated, some are somewhere in between. People say he lifted cars, not completely off the ground, but enough to move them. His longtime friend Tim White confirmed André once flipped a car that blocked him in, just grabbed it and rolled aside. They say he could carry 4 men at once. There's footage of him holding 2 full-grown wrestlers under each arm, walking around like they weighed nothing. They say he accidentally broke door handles just opening them. His grip was so strong, normal hardware couldn't survive. Then there are the drinking stories. Someone claimed he drank 116 beers in one sitting. Another story mentions $40,000 in bar tabs during one film shoot. Were these numbers accurate? Hard to say. But here's the truth underneath. André was big enough that even modest feats looked superhuman. He didn't train in gyms. He didn't lift weights religiously. His strength came from leverage, from bone density, from a body operating at a scale most of us can't imagine. Think about basic physics. A 520-pound man has to be strong just to stand up, just to walk, just to exist. Every movement requires power. So yes, he was strong. Stronger than almost anyone you'd meet. But the myths grew because people needed to explain the impossible. How could someone that big be real? The stories helped them process it. But here's what they don't tell you in those stories. What did this strength cost him? By the mid-1980s, André's body was breaking down. Acromegaly doesn't just make you big. It makes your organs work too hard. Your joints wear out too fast. Your heart struggles with the load. André wore a back brace under his wrestling singlet, hidden from cameras, supporting a spine that carried 520 pounds every day. Walking hurt, wrestling hurt, just sitting hurt. Friend from that era, remember his routine. He'd arrive at the arena hours early, sit quietly in the locker room, brace himself mentally for what came next. Then he'd stand, slowly, carefully, and walk to the ring. The crowd saw Giant. He felt every step. Some people whispered that he drank to manage pain, not for fun, not to show off, but because after a lifetime of hurting, he needed relief. His doctor visits became more frequent. Tests showed strain on his heart. His joints were deteriorating, but he kept working, kept traveling, kept being André the Giant. Because what else could he do? This was his life. This was his identity. Picture this moment. A hotel room at 3 a.m. André sits on the edge of a bed that's too small. His back aches. His knees throb. Tomorrow he'll wrestle in front of 15,000 people. They'll cheer his power. They'll never know the cost. But there was something that made it worthwhile. A friendship that meant more than any championship. And he protected that friend in a way few people understand. Hulk Hogan came up in wrestling when André was already established. The younger wrestler looked up to the Giant. And André, surprisingly, took him under his wing. They traveled together, ate together. André taught Hogan the politics of wrestling, how to read a crowd, how to protect yourself. But mostly he taught him respect. André had a test for new wrestlers. He'd offer his hand for a shake. If you squeezed too hard, trying to prove yourself, he'd crush your hand. If you were respectful, gentle, he'd smile. You passed, Hogan passed, and André decided this kid had potential. By 1987, Hogan was the biggest star in wrestling, but he needed something to make his legacy permanent. He needed to defeat the undefeatable. He needed to slam André the Giant. WrestleMania III, the Pontiac Silverdome, 93,000 people packed inside. André walked the ring at 520 pounds. Hogan waited, knowing what had to happen. André could have refused. He could have protected his mystique. But he understood something about legends. Sometimes you have to let them be passed on. The match ended with Hogan lifting André, body slamming him. Crowd erupted. Hogan reportedly tore a muscle in his back from the effort. The weight was real. The moment was real. But here's what made it special. André allowed it. He gave Hogan that moment, because that's what a mentor does. Backstage, André was still intimidating. Other wrestlers gave him space, not from fear of anger, but from respect of presence. When André spoke, everyone listened. When he entered a room, conversations paused. It wasn't ego. It was scale. And even in friendship, that scale created distance. In 1987, the same year as WrestleMania III, André filmed The Princess Bride. He played Fezzik, the gentle giant. It became his favorite work. For once, people saw him as something other than a monster. Something warm. Something human. The cast and crew loved him. Actor Cary Elwes wrote about André's kindness years later. How he told stories between takes. How his laugh filled the set. But filming was difficult. André's back pain was severe by then. Scenes where he had to lift actress Robin Wright required special rigs. He physically couldn't do it anymore. Here's a moment that defines him. During outdoor filming in England, it was cold. Robin Wright was shivering between takes. André walked over. He placed his enormous hand over her head and shoulders. Like a warm, living tent, she stopped shivering. He just stood there, sheltering her from the cold. No words, just quiet protection. Production had to build custom furniture for him. Chairs reinforced with steel. Boots the size of small children. Doorways on set were measured before he arrived. The behind-the-scenes crew saw something the audience didn't. They saw how hard he worked to make others comfortable. How he'd joke about his size to ease tension. How he'd praise other actors generously. The movie became a cult classic, and for millions of people, Fezzik was their introduction to André. Not as a monster, not as an unstoppable force, but as a gentle giant who just wanted to belong. That film meant everything to him. He made his wrestling friends watch it. He carried a VHS copy on the road. For once, his size wasn't about intimidation. It was about heart. But the legend that defined him came from one specific moment. A moment where his 520-pound presence changed everything. And that moment reveals why no one will ever intimidate quite like André the Giant. The year was 1976. André was already famous in wrestling. But on this night, something happened that turned fame into legend. A riot nearly broke out in a sold-out arena in Montreal. The details vary depending on who tells the story, but the core truth remains the same. A controversial match finish had enraged the crowd. Chairs were being thrown. Security was overwhelmed. Thousands of angry fans surged toward the ring. The other wrestlers had already fled to the locker room, but André stood in the center of the ring, alone. At over 450 pounds and already enormous, already known, the crowd pushed forward, shouting, violent, dangerous, and then André took one step forward. Just one, and the front row stopped. He didn't yell, he didn't threaten, he just stood there, his massive frame filling their vision. His presence saying everything words couldn't. The crowd began to settle. Security regrouped. The riot never happened. Later, a promoter asked André why he stayed. Why he didn't run like everyone else. André shrugged. Someone needed to stop them, he said. I was big enough. That's the moment. Not a body slam. Not a championship. Just a man using his size to protect instead of destroy. Using intimidation as a shield for others. The story spread through wrestling territories. The giant who stopped a riot by existing. It became part of his mystique, but it revealed something deeper. André understood his gift and his burden. He was intimidating, but he could choose how to use that power, and he chose gentleness most of the time. That choice, combined with impossible size, created something unique, an intimidation based on respect rather than fear. Here's what made André the Giant the most intimidating man of his era. It wasn't the number on a scale. It wasn't the championships or the matches. It was a complete package of what he represented. A 520-pound human being moving through a world built for people half his size. Calm, gentle, aware of every space he occupied. When André walked into a room, physics itself seemed wrong. Doors looked small. Ceilings felt low. Other people looked fragile. Your brain had to recalibrate reality around him. That's intimidation at a primal level. But here's the paradox. He never wanted to intimidate anyone. He just wanted to live, to work, to have friends, to be treated with dignity. The intimidation came from contrast. This enormous power, this physical impossibility, wrapped around a kind soul. You knew he could hurt you. You knew he was stronger than any 10 men. But you also knew he probably wouldn't, unless you disrespected him. That possibility, that tiny chance of consequence, kept people careful around him. Respectful, intimidated. Modern wrestling has given us larger-than-life characters. CGI has given us giants on screen. But they're all fictional. André was real. You could meet him, shake his hand if he let you, feel his palm swallow yours. Look up at his face and understand how small you were. That reality made him irreplaceable. His condition, acromegaly, was slowly killing him. He knew it. His friends knew it. But he kept going, kept traveling, kept being the giant, until January 27th, 1993, when his heart finally gave out. He died in a Paris hotel room, visiting for his father's funeral. 56 years old, a life shorter than it should have been, but a presence that will never fade. Because André the Giant didn't try to intimidate the world. The world simply wasn't built for a man like him, and his legacy lives in every person who remembers that silhouette entering the ring. That moment when everything else felt smaller, when size and gentleness and myth merged into one unforgettable giant. He stood 7 feet tall, weighed 520 pounds, and moved through life with quiet dignity. No one has intimidated quite like that since. No one ever will, because there will never be another André. And if you think André's size was astonishing, wait until you hear about the man Hollywood once called a real-life giant.